As a parent, your greatest fear is receiving that call, the one that begins with, "There's been an incident," and leaves you bracing for what comes next. Before we dive into the story, tell us where you're watching from. This is a story about one mother's sudden trial, beginning as an ordinary day at home and shifting in a single moment. It may change the way you think about a phone call, and how quickly calm can vanish. Her day began peacefully enough, with simple household rhythms, until that familiar ring interrupted everything. Sunlight still filled the house with calm, edging across the counters in slow-moving shapes. She kept her hands busy, folding tiny socks, setting them into pairs, smoothing fabric as if order could hold the day steady. Her tea sat cooling beside her, the steam long gone. The quiet surrounded her, just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint shuffle of laundry against the table. The sudden ring cut through everything. The number on the screen was unfamiliar. She hesitated, thumb hovering. For a moment, she thought about letting it pass into voicemail, but instinct pressed her to pick up. The line opened to the principal's voice. Calm words, but stretched thin, pulled tight at the edges. That controlled tone told her more than the sentences themselves. She felt a rush of heat as her chest tightened. It was in the way every syllable carried weight, the way careful professionalism couldn't fully bury the strain beneath. Her hands trembled around the phone. The socks she had folded slipped sideways, forgotten on the table. "We need you to come immediately." Just that. No explanation, no detail, only a direct request that invited dread. She stood frozen, her mind darting ahead, each thought darker than the last. Maybe her daughter had fallen. Maybe there had been an argument. But something inside recoiled. This didn't feel routine. She knew from the principal's tone that this wasn't the kind of call parents expect. Her keys felt colder than usual in her hand. At the edge of her sleeve, she noticed a faint smear she didn't remember before, a mark she brushed at without success. It caught her attention for half a second, then slipped beneath the weight of urgency. Even so, the image stayed in the corner of her mind, clinging like a question unanswered. She opened the door almost without thought, stepping into daylight that no longer felt warm. The quiet house stood behind her, unchanged, while everything inside her had shifted. The drive ahead would not be ordinary. Every moment between now and the school threatened to stretch beyond measure. She turned onto the main road, the school just a few miles away, yet each block carried a weight she couldn't set down. The familiar route looked different when framed by fear. Every red light seemed longer. Every glance at the dashboard clock felt sharper. Her grip on the wheel tightened until her hands started to ache. At one stop, she noticed children shuffling home, backpacks bouncing against their shoulders. Usually she waved, but today the sight pressed harder against her chest. The simple routine of school felt fragile, like glass waiting to crack. Her chest tightened. The drive blurred, but certain details pierced through. The thud of a leaf against her windshield, the push of air from a passing bus, the faint trace of her own perfume caught in a pocket of air, mixing with the raw edge of nerves. She rehearsed questions in silence, about allergies, about emergencies, about what could have pulled her daughter out of class so abruptly. Each thought left her more unsettled than the last. By the time the school building rose into view, she was holding her breath without realizing it. Sunlight lay flat across the grounds, but there was no shouting from the playground, no children waiting in lines. The swings moved only slightly in the breeze, as if holding a memory too recent to forget. That stillness didn't belong to a typical afternoon. She pulled into the first open spot, tires bumping against the curb in her haste. The car sat crooked across the lines, but she didn't pause to fix it. Her shoulders were tense, breath coming in brief, uneven bursts as she opened the door and stepped onto the pavement. The weight of the keys in her hand suddenly felt enormous. If this part resonates with you, leave a comment. It helps others feel seen. The building's front doors stood close now, yet each step pressed heavier, as though the distance refused to shrink. She scanned the windows, searching for normal signs of school life, but found only stillness staring back. As she reached for the handle, she braced herself. What waited inside was not noise or chaos, but a quiet that would demand its own kind of strength. The school office felt different the moment she stepped inside. Instead of the usual shuffle of papers and ringing phones, there was a strange stillness. The secretary gave her a polite but thin smile, one that didn't reach the eyes, before buzzing her through the main door. Only the soft hum of a computer and the faint click of a distant door echoed in the space. Staff members kept moving, but their focus stayed elsewhere. On screens, on stacks of paper, anywhere but on her. When the principal appeared, her face carried a seriousness that made the air grow heavier. There was no warm greeting this time, only a solemn nod before she motioned toward a small conference room. The mother noticed the way the principal's hand lingered on the frame, fingers trembling ever so slightly. The room itself was plain. Neutral walls, a sterile table, and a single tissue box placed in the center as if in anticipation of what might come. The principal spoke slowly, each word chosen with care. She mentioned that something had happened during recess but stayed vague, circling the ideas of supervision and safety without giving specifics. As they walked, the mother's eyes caught details outside the room. On a desk nearby, supplies lay ready. A bandage roll, an emergency blanket still in plastic wrapping, and a slim case that reminded her of an EpiPen. Her chest tightened. Memories of checkups, the sound of doctors warning about allergies, flickered through her mind. She wasn't sure if this was connected, but the sight alone was enough to stir panic. Many schools have protocols for medical situations, and it was clear here that staff were carefully following theirs. The principal's composure remained even, though her voice carried an undercurrent of urgency she couldn't disguise. She explained that the nurse was involved and that the situation was being closely monitored. Then she paused, her eyes fixed on the mother's, steady but serious. "We need to show you something," she said quietly, her hand resting on a door handle just down the hall. What waited behind that door would not be ordinary. It was the first moment the mother would see her child again, and nothing could prepare her for how different that sight would feel. The classroom door swung open, and there she was, her daughter, sitting on a small wooden chair, shoulders hunched, dark hair caught back with a crooked tie. A picture that should have felt ordinary instead struck her as all wrong. The motionless figure didn't belong to the lively child she knew. She moved closer, noticing one detail at a time. Mud clung to the shoes, green streaks staining the white rubber toes. A hole in her leggings revealed a scraped knee, raw but not bleeding much. Then her gaze lifted higher, the pallor across her daughter's skin, the faint gray shadow circling her lips, the way each inhale seemed to take effort. As a mother, she knew the small signals mattered most. Shallow breaths, weary eyes, an unnatural stillness. They spoke louder than any bandage could. Her daughter looked up, attempting a smile. It was weak, strained, and it slipped almost as quickly as it appeared, leaving her miniature frame even more drained. The teacher stood nearby, clutching a tissue with a dark smudge, something wiped away minutes earlier. It felt like evidence of a struggle no one had fully understood. The girl's hands kept moving across the desk, tracing invisible shapes on the surface. Over and over, small patterns drawn as though words were too heavy to carry. It wasn't play. It had the weight of communication. The mother lowered herself until she was level with her daughter. Resting a hand on her child's back, she felt tiny tremors shiver beneath her palm. Up close, details sharpened. A faint swelling around the eyes. The slow, deliberate swallow of a throat working too hard. The soft, uneven whistle rising and falling with each exhale. That close, the truth became undeniable. This wasn't a fall in the grass or the sting of playground embarrassment. Something deeper had taken hold, something urgent, pressing past what the nurse's office could manage. Seconds in the room stretched thin, measured only by the ticking clock at the front. Just as she leaned in, her daughter's lips began to move, forming words that came out faint and halting. What she whispered next would tighten the air even further. Her daughter's weak voice reached her in fragments. The sounds were faint, but each attempt carried a weight that struck deeper than the words themselves. Her lips moved slowly, every syllable pulled out with effort, broken by shallow, uneven breaths. Then two clear words cut through: bee and sting. They landed like shards, separated and fragile, pointing toward a truth she hadn't seen yet. The child's trembling hand lifted, finger brushing at her own neck. Following the gesture, the mother's eyes fell on the first visible signs, patches of small red hives rising just above the collar of her shirt. In the seconds it took to notice, the marks seemed to spread further across her skin. The teacher, standing nearby, explained in a hushed tone. They had treated it as a routine sting during recess. Some ice, a bit of cleaning, nothing more. From a distance, it had looked minor, the sort of injury seen countless times on playgrounds. Yet here, up close, the faint wheeze and the child's fading color told a different story. The mother remembered that past incident, years ago, when a single sting caused swelling. And she remembered the doctor's warning that reactions can change over time, sometimes growing worse without warning. Her instincts focused on what she could see and hear now, the struggling breath, the gray tinge around her daughter's lips, the weakness in her hands as she traced the desk with unfocused movements. Each small sign pressed harder against her, confirming that this was not like before. Panic trembled at the edges, but she forced herself to steady. Somewhere in the jumbled memories of an old first aid course, directions and cautions resurfaced. They mingled with the sharper truth she was facing. Her daughter's condition was slipping beyond what anyone in the room could manage. Her eyes darted once toward the principal in the doorway, then toward her phone. There was no more time for quiet observation or careful weighing. Her hand moved almost automatically, reaching down, screen lighting beneath her thumb. She knew what number had to be dialed, even if it meant cutting through paralysis and protocol alike. The decision hovered at the edge of action, carrying the weight of everything that came next. Her fingers shook as she pressed the 3 digits, the ones no parent ever wants to dial. The phone was already at her ear before she thought about school procedures or the nurse nearby. She couldn't wait for steps or signatures. Time felt thin. The dispatcher's voice came steady, calm, almost measured against the frantic air in the room. That contrast steadied her too, pulling her words into order. She gave the facts in clipped beats: her location, her daughter's age, the bee sting, the swelling, the uneven breath. Her eyes never moved from her child's face while she spoke. The dispatcher walked her through simple checks. Was her daughter conscious? Could she still respond to her name? Did her chest rise evenly? The mother answered quickly, each reply sharper than the wandering thoughts she was fighting back. With every question came a next step. Tilt her forward slightly, keep her airway clear, keep talking to her. Grounded instructions that held her steady while panic pressed at the edges. She placed her hand gently at her daughter's back, guiding each breath with her own rhythm. The little girl leaned into her touch but still fought for air. The mother could see it, how her lips looked different than they had just moments before, how the shadows around her eyes seemed heavier now. She knew every minute counted and clung to the hope that trained help was already on the way. The principal watched from the doorway, his expression a mixture of relief and fear. He nodded solemnly at her when she caught his eye, a silent acknowledgement that the call had been the right choice. Around them, the room held its breath, waiting. If this moment hits home, share a short note below. Your voice matters. Then it came, the faint wail, growing closer. Sirens carried through the quiet hallways, louder with every passing second. Dread rose with the sound, but so did relief. Help was not an idea anymore. It was real and approaching fast. She pressed her palm more firmly against her daughter's back, eyes fixed on the door. Seconds stretched, waited with expectation. Any moment now, trained hands would step inside. The doorway filled with the sudden presence of uniforms, and the room shifted. The paramedics entered with a calm that steadied the air. Their movements were practiced, their voices low but clear, as they began a brisk assessment. One knelt to the child's level, flashlight angled gently, while another set down a compact kit on the desk. They checked her pulse, her breathing, the effort in each swallow. Questions came quickly but with a steady rhythm. When had the sting happened? How long had the breathing seemed difficult? Was there ever a reaction like this before? The mother answered as best she could, her words overlapping with the sound of zippers and Velcro fastening on equipment. The lead paramedic leaned close, stethoscope against the child's chest, then her back. He noted changes that wouldn't have been clear to an untrained eye. The reaction was not easing. It was worsening. He spoke gently, explaining to the mother that this was more serious than it first appeared, and that treatment had to begin immediately. His tone was even, almost reassuring, even as he readied an injection. A thin click, a sharp press, and then the child's shoulders loosened slightly. Around her mouth, the color shifted, faint but noticeable. The mother's hand stayed on her daughter's arm, grounding her, as she realized that waiting only minutes longer might have allowed this to spiral in ways too heavy to imagine. The stretcher came next. In swift, coordinated movements, they lifted the girl while still monitoring her. leads and straps connected as the wheels locked into place. It felt quick, almost too quick, but the smoothness of their work radiated control. The school nurse slipped into the room with a folder clutched tightly, relief softening her face as she looked from the mother to the professionals now leading the moment. Before guiding them out, the paramedic turned directly to the mother. "You did the right thing calling when you did," he told her, steady and simple. The words lodged deep, anchored by experience, carrying relief but also a chill reminder. As the stretcher rolled away, the mother followed, every step carrying her forward into a different kind of waiting, one that would not feel calmer until much later. In the hospital's quiet recovery room, the mother sat with her daughter's hand resting warmly in her own. The adrenaline had finally ebbed, leaving behind exhaustion and a deep relief that pulsed with every steady beep of the monitor. The rhythmic sound marked each breath her daughter took, easier now, calmer, with color slowly returning to the face that had gone pale that afternoon. She stayed close, watching the small movements of her child's chest as though each rise was proof that the worst was truly over. Still, her mind replayed flashes from the day. The crooked hair tie, the whispered words, the split-second choice to dial for help. Questions pressed at her, but only in brief. Could she have acted sooner, asked better questions? The thoughts passed quickly. What mattered most now was that she had acted at all. Later, the doctor sat with them, his words measured. He explained that reactions like these don't always stop with the first sting, that they can sometimes grow worse instead of better. He told her what to watch for, not to frighten her, but to steady her with knowledge. The nurse joined them too, going over the same points carefully, so both mother and school would know the signs if anything like this happened again. They talked through the next steps as a team. The doctor recommended updating school forms, setting clearer lines of communication, and discussing whether carrying emergency medication would be right for her daughter. These weren't orders, but options, laid out with care so she could return home with a plan and guidance to lean on. What stayed with her was the reminder that health and safety don't live neatly inside protocols. Sometimes intuition carries you where rules cannot. Her daughter stirred beside her then, lids fluttering open. A faint, tired smile rose to her face, no longer strained, but steady enough to hold. The mother smoothed her hair back with a firm, gentle hand. What she felt now was less fear than recognition. How swiftly life can tilt, how closely a parent's watchfulness can matter, and how small decisions hold extraordinary weight. The room was quiet as evening settled in, but the lessons of the day lingered, waiting to meet the quieter moments that would follow at home. Back home, they sat at the kitchen table, sharing apple slices. The crunch of each bite and the simple warmth of the room carried a weight she hadn't felt before. Ordinary comforts felt sharper now, almost like anchors after a storm. This story reminds us that a parent's intuition often speaks first, long before anyone else sees the signs. If this resonated with you, share your own experience in the comments. If you want more stories like this, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. What signs do you watch for? Or what small tip would you pass along?